pre-dawn darkness of June 6, 1944, a young German soldier, just 20 years old, rushed to his position at Widerstandsnest 62, which commanded a view of Omaha Beach. He took his place behind the formidable MG-42 machine gun, prepared for the imminent onslaught. Out in the choppy waters of the English Channel before him, more than 34,000 American troops anxiously awaited their turn to storm the beach and carve their names into the annals of history. This day, forever etched into memory as the longest day, would tragically become the shortest day for many of these brave young soldiers. For 20-year-old Heinrich Severloh, born into a farmer family in Baden-Württemberg who had never fired a shot in his life, June 6, 1944 marked the day he would earn the infamous moniker the Beast of Omaha. This narrative recounts his relentless actions during the grueling 9 hours of the D-Day invasion and delves into the profound impact those actions had on the remainder of his life, spanning the next 60 years. It is a story of a young man thrust into the brutality of war, his transformation under the pressure of battle, and the enduring burden of his role in one of history's most intense and tragic events. Severloh's journey from a quiet rural life to the chaos of the front lines, and ultimately to a lifetime of reflection and remorse, offers a poignant and haunting glimpse into the human cost of war. Lieutenant Bernhard Fröking's voice was urgently heard. He shouted, "They are coming!" The voice jolted Private Severloh awake in a small French farmhouse a few kilometers inland from the coast. For weeks, everyone in the 353rd Infantry Division had been anticipating this moment and knew exactly how to respond. Field Marshal Rommel had always emphasized that the invasion must be repelled within 24 hours to prevent the war from being lost. At this critical juncture, however, Rommel was away on the other side of Normandy, celebrating his wife's birthday, and the Führer was enjoying an undisturbed night's sleep. WN-62 was the most formidable of the 15 strong points overlooking the area that would become known as Omaha Beach. These defences stretched from WN-60 near the cliffs at the eastern end above the Cabourg Draw to WN-74, located 4.5 miles west, just beyond the small coastal village of Vierville. Each strong point was strategically placed to provide a comprehensive defensive network against the anticipated Allied invasion. Spanning approximately 325 square metres, WN-62 was situated on the northern slope of the bluffs, offering an excellent vantage point to fire down onto the beach. This strongpoint was heavily fortified with a range of weaponry, including two 75mm cannons, two 50mm anti-tank guns, two 50mm mortars, and several machine guns. Among these were an MG-34, mounted for anti-aircraft use, and two pre-war water-cooled Polish machine guns, all designed to maximise defensive capabilities against the incoming forces. Additionally, WN-62 was strategically located beside the Colleville-sur-Mer Draw, chosen by the Allies as a primary exit route from the beach. This made it a focal point for the assault platoons aiming to penetrate inland. Severloh's MG-42, with its capability of firing 1,200 rounds per minute, was positioned 7 meters from the entrance to the observation post manned by Lieutenant Bernhard Fröking. Hein's dual role was to fend off the invaders and protect his officer, who was crucial in coordinating fire on identified targets through a telescope in his bunker. Fröking's crucial information from using his binoculars was relayed to the communications bunker, equipped with a transceiver several meters up the slope. This data was then transmitted to the artillery battery stationed farther inland at Hauteville, less than 3 kilometers south of Colleville-sur-Mer and near the farmhouse where they were quartered. The battery was prepared to unleash a barrage of 105mm shells onto the beach as soon as the invaders appeared. The coordinates for the bombardment had been pre-arranged, with practice shots using dummy shells to avoid damaging the carefully placed beach obstacles designed to destroy any landing craft that reached the shore. Rommel had meticulously planned to cover every angle. It fell to Fröking, Severlo and the 12 other men of the 352nd Division to defend their section of the coast from the Allies. They were supported by 27 soldiers from the 726th Grenadier Regiment and occupied one of the most strategically positioned strongpoints on the French side of the English Channel. Although outnumbered, their arsenal was formidable, and Heinrich was resolute in not letting his lieutenant down. Hein, known for his quiet, practical demeanour and reliability, was determined to fulfil his duty despite the uncertainties of the day. Conscripted in 1942, Hein had experienced frostbite on the Eastern Front and suffered severe tonsillitis, leading to a transfer to a hospital in Warsaw. After recovering, he underwent further training and rejoined his unit, now the 352nd Division, in December 1943. Despite his setbacks, Hein's officers respected his initiative and ability to get the job done. Hein was assigned to the 1st Artillery Battery as an orderly to Lieutenant Bernhard Fröking, a 32-year-old former schoolteacher. Hein quickly formed a strong rapport with Fröking, an officer he found trustworthy and reliable. Their mutual loyalty created a bond that helped them navigate the challenges of their military duties. The two were billeted together in a French manor house owned by the Legrand family in Huteville. During their time there, Hein began learning French, largely thanks to Fröking, who was fluent in the language. Despite representing Nazi Germany, both men made efforts not to alienate the local population. Their respectful behaviour helped maintain a peaceful coexistence with the French residents. After the war, Hein continued to stay in touch with the Legrand family, reflecting the genuine connections he had formed during his time in Huteville. Severlo's MG-42 was positioned right here, just 7 meters from the observation bunker visible on the left. His field of fire extended directly toward the beach and to the left, covering the eastern end of Easy Red. This photograph, taken by the author at low tide, illustrates the killing zone that every American soldier had to traverse after disembarking from their landing craft. Here is a photo of the front of the observation bunker, displaying significant damage inflicted by the Allies' naval bombardment. The two soldiers arrived at WN-62 at 12:55 am on June 6th. Fröking immediately headed to his observation post, while a sergeant brought a box of ammunition for Severlo, who then loaded his MG-42. The soldiers of the 726th Grenadier Regiment were also in position, waiting for dawn. Poor weather conditions hampered visibility, but as the sky gradually brightened, they saw the horizon teeming with ships of various sizes. Shortly after 6 am, bombers from the US 8th Air Force appeared overhead, prompting Hein and his comrades to dive for cover. They were fortunate. The poor visibility caused the bombers to err on the side of caution, resulting in their bombs landing harmlessly inland away from the gun positions. However, the respite was brief as Allied warships began a relentless barrage of rockets and large shells. The sheer size of the armada and the intensity of the bombardment made it clear to Hein that he would be fighting for his life that day, which meant he had to eliminate as many of the enemy as possible to survive. Around 6:30 am, the first landing craft came into range, their ramps lowering to release waves of soldiers from the US 1st Infantry Division, famously known as the Big Red One. These were not the British Tommies the defenders had expected, but American GIs who charged towards the shore under the mistaken belief that the preceding air bombardment had neutralised most of the German defences. The invasion plans had meticulously categorized the D-Day beaches to ensure an organized landing and swift progression inland. The sector directly in front of and to the left of WN62 was codenamed Easy Red, a critical point of entry for the Allied forces. Just outside Cevallo's primary line of fire to the right was the Fox Green sector. As the American soldiers disembarked, they faced a brutal reality. The defences were far from eliminated. Hein adhered to his orders, waiting until the soldiers were knee-deep in the water before opening fire. This tactic instantly created chaos, forcing the survivors and wounded to scramble for cover behind the beach obstacles meant to impede and damage the landing craft. Many were left with no choice but to take shelter behind the bodies of fallen comrades that washed ashore. Despite the initial shock of encountering unexpected resistance, the soldiers of the 1st Infantry Division pushed forward with determination. They struggled through the surf and onto the heavily mined beaches, where barbed wire and obstacles slowed their advance. Cevallo, from his well-fortified position, unleashed a relentless barrage of machine gun fire, cutting down the exposed troops as they attempted to find cover and regroup. The chaos on the beach was overwhelming. Many landing craft were destroyed before the troops could even disembark, and those who made it to the shore found themselves in a deadly crossfire. Cevallo's MG-42, capable of firing 1,200 rounds per minute, turned the beach into a killing field. The Americans, realizing the extent of the defences, called for naval gunfire support, which brought temporary relief, but also added to the destruction and confusion on the ground. Closer to the shoreline, an MG-34 encountered operational issues, making Hein's MG-42 the primary source of devastation. Years later, Hein reconnected with Franz Gluckel, a fellow gunner from the 762nd Regiment. Franz, who was only 18 at the time, operated an older, water-cooled Polish machine gun. However, a hand injury rendered him unable to continue after just a few hours of combat. The first American troops landed at low tide, initially at a distance of about 450 meters. As the tide rose, subsequent waves of soldiers came progressively closer, making them easier targets. Each landing craft dropped its ramp, releasing around 30 soldiers at a time. Hein's MG-42, with its rapid rate of fire, could decimate an entire platoon with a precise 3-second burst. The MG-42's high rate of discharge meant that if one bullet hit its mark, it was often followed by several more. After the war, Hein met an American soldier who had been struck 3 times while disembarking on the beach, likely making him one of Hein's victims. As each wave of soldiers arrived, Hein continued his relentless firing, taking full advantage of the rising tide to inflict maximum casualties. This deadly efficiency contributed significantly to the chaos and carnage experienced by the American troops as they struggled to gain a foothold on Omaha Beach. The lulls between the waves of incoming troops allowed the machine gun barrel to cool slightly, but it still required frequent replacement. During these breaks, Hein used his Mauser K98 rifle, which he estimated he fired about 400 times that day. Targets were plentiful, as the strong west-to-east current pushed many of the smaller landing craft off course, causing them to beach within range of Hein's gun. Lieutenant Frerking and the rest of the team were heavily occupied with identifying targets, setting coordinates, and relaying messages through the zigzag trenches to the artillery battery in Hauteville. Their coordinated efforts ensured that the heavy guns could inflict maximum damage on the landing forces. Hein was deeply focused on his task, but as the morning wore on, he noticed that he was the only machine gun firing on that section of the beach. Years later, while researching German military archives, he found a message sent at 12 minutes past 10 that morning confirming that only one machine gun was operational at WN62, which was his. This realization brought home the extent of his personal responsibility for the casualties inflicted on Easy Red that day. The knowledge weighed heavily on him, adding to the burden of his wartime actions. Cervelo remembered the events of June 6th vividly. He recounted seeing several waves of 10 to 15 landing craft heading towards his stretch of Omaha Beach, estimating that 6 such waves approached before noon. Throughout the length of Omaha Beach, each wave comprised about 50 landing craft, a mix of wooden-sided LCVPs with armoured ramps and more heavily protected LCAs. As soon as the ramps lowered, releasing about 50 machine gun rounds, many soldiers, in a desperate attempt to avoid the barrage, leapt over the sides of the boats, often plunging into the water too deep for their heavy gear. Machine guns are most effective when aimed at tightly packed groups, especially in confined areas. After Cervelo's machine gun fire wreaked havoc on the troops disembarking from the landing craft, he switched to his rifle to pick off the survivors. One particular incident, which haunted Cervelo for years, occurred during this phase. Today, 2 concrete blocks stand on the beach, remnants of a mill that crushed beach pebbles for bunker construction. During the battle, an American soldier carrying a flamethrower sought cover behind one of these blocks. Cervelo, now using his rifle, shot the soldier through the helmet, killing him instantly. His lifeless body dropped to the ground. This personal and direct act of killing left a deeper psychological scar on Cervelo than the sight of numerous soldiers falling to his machine gun fire. This individual encounter replayed in his nightmares for years, highlighting the intense and personal trauma of war. After about 2 p.m, Hein observed several Sherman tanks advancing from the west, moving towards his section of the beach near Exit E1 at St. Laurent. By late morning, the main defences of WN-65, which protected the St. Laurent exit, had been neutralised, allowing columns of American soldiers to climb various parts of the bluffs unimpeded. Having exhausted his supply of 12,000 machine gun rounds, Hein was forced to switch to tracer bullets, which were less lethal but had the significant drawback of revealing his position. This was particularly dangerous as American warships, now taking advantage of the rising tide, sailed closer to the shore, poised to target any visible German positions. Despite the increased risk, Hein continued to fire, aware that his exposed position made him vulnerable to the advancing tanks and the approaching naval firepower. As the day progressed, the relentless advance of the Allied forces made it increasingly difficult for Hein and his comrades to maintain their defense. The sight of American soldiers scaling the bluffs and the approaching armor underscored the dire situation. Hein switching to tracer rounds marked a turning point as it not only reduced his effectiveness, but also heightened the danger he faced from both ground and naval assaults. The relentless pressure from the advancing Allies highlighted the shifting tide of battle as the once formidable German defences began to crumble under the sustained Allied offensive. Not long after, a shell exploded in front of Hein's position, leaving him with a painful facial wound. By 3 p.m, Lieutenant Frerking realised they had no choice but to abandon WN-62. Many soldiers from the 7th 26th Regiment had already been injured or had retreated up the slopes, and Frerking's observation post had just taken a direct hit. The time had come for the remaining soldiers to make their escape through the communication trench, which offered some immediate protection. Frerking ordered Hein to leave first, promising to follow shortly. Hein recalled this as a particularly poignant moment because Frerking, in a break from military protocol, addressed him using the familiar du form, indicating a personal bond. The term du form is the second-person singular form used to address your close friends or family. Hein quickly scrambled down the trench, carrying a hot machine gun and a belt of ammunition, his heart pounding with the urgency of the situation. As Hein fled, the reality of their dire situation hit him. The communication trench, though offering some cover, was no guarantee of safety. The retreat was chaotic, with explosions and gunfire all around. Each step Hein took was fraught with danger, as the Allied forces were closing in and the German defences were collapsing. His mind raced with thoughts of survival, the bond with his comrades, and the intense fear of capture or death. Lieutenant Frerking, staying true to his word, followed Hein down the trench. The bond they shared, forged in the crucible of battle, provided a glimmer of hope amid the chaos. Their retreat marked the end of WN-62's resistance, a strong point that had once been a formidable barrier but was now being overrun. Hein's escape, burdened with the weight of his weapon and the fresh memories of the day's horrors, symbolised the desperate human struggle for survival in the face of overwhelming odds. The first edition of Hein Severlow's book, WN-62, was not released until 2000, with the first English translation published in 2011. Prior to this, the primary perspectives on the day's events came from numerous American eyewitness accounts, which are still widely known and accessible. These accounts vividly depict the harrowing experience of facing the relentless fire of an MG-42 and detail the gradual advances that led to the strong point being nearly encircled. At H-hour, 6:30 am, LCVPs carrying troops from E and F companies of the 16th Infantry Regiment, 1st Infantry Division, landed on the beach near the Colleville exit. Captain Ed Wozensky, leading Company E, recounted how, upon disembarking and wading ashore, his men were immediately subjected to intense machine gun fire, resulting in many casualties in the bloody surf, with only a few managing to reach the relative safety of the shingle bank. Subsequent waves included LCVPs with soldiers from the 106th Regiment, 29th Infantry Division. These men, intended to land much further west, were pushed eastward by strong currents and adverse weather conditions. Upon arrival, their original landing plans were quickly abandoned as survival became the priority. The combination of fierce resistance and chaotic landings provided a stark depiction of the immense challenges faced by the Allied forces as they struggled to secure a foothold on Omaha Beach. Within an hour, the headquarters company of the 1st Battalion, 16th Infantry, landed to the left of Easy Red, directly below Severlow's position under heavy automatic weapons fire. They found survivors from the initial waves pinned down on the beach, unable to advance due to the relentless barrage. A reserve regiment from the 18th Regiment 1st Division was scheduled to land before noon, but their reconnaissance team quickly realised the intensity of the fire from WN-62 and had to revise their landing schedule, recognising the formidable challenge they faced. Unbeknownst to Hein at the time, one of his targets was a notable figure. Robert Capa, a renowned war photojournalist, had joined an LCVP to capture some of the most iconic images of the day. Capa's bravery nearly led to his demise under Severlow's fire, but he miraculously survived, his photographs providing a stark visual record of the chaos and heroism on Omaha Beach. Around 11 am, another famous figure, Ernest Hemingway, approached Easy Red. However, the pilot of his boat, recognizing the extreme danger of landing in such a heavily defended area, wisely veered off to a different section of the beach, sparing Hemingway from the deadly crossfire. The early waves also included men from the 5th Special Engineer Brigade, who encountered severe fire between Colleville and the next beach exit to the west at Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer, codenamed E1. These engineers, tasked with clearing obstacles and mines, faced tremendous challenges under the heavy bombardment. Severlow later confirmed the intensity of the situation, recalling that during a brief lull between waves he noticed a red flag in the sand below. This flag, placed by a survivor, was intended to guide subsequent landing craft to safer spots, highlighting the small acts of survival and adaptation amid the broader chaos of the battle. Around the same time, a few duplex-drive Sherman tanks reached the beach. One tank managed to knock out two 75mm guns positioned on the opposite side of the Colleville exit, creating a crucial gap in the German defences and allowing Allied troops to make progress up the bluffs. Despite this breakthrough, the situation directly below Severlow's position remained grim, with no movement off the beach. By 8 am, the situation was so dire that the possibility of aborting the assault on Omaha Beach was seriously considered. From their vantage points on offshore vessels, observers using binoculars could see small groups of men beginning to climb the bluffs farther east around WN61 and WN60. Although the situation at Omaha Beach was critical, these signs indicated that the invasion plan was working in other areas. Hein would only discover years later that his relentless efforts to halt the beach landings could have drastically influenced the outcome of the battle that day. While the mortar and artillery fire directed from WN62 played a major role in the devastation on the beach, Hein's machine gun fire provided essential cover. His suppressive fire allowed Lieutenant Fröking and the team to accurately relay target coordinates, enhancing the effectiveness of their defensive firepower and contributing significantly to the overall resistance. Unbeknownst to Hein and his comrades, by 1:15 p.m, Captain Joe Dawson and a contingent from G Company, 16th Infantry had already reached the outskirts of Collierville, directly inland from Hein's position. Throughout the morning, Dawson had found a route up the bluffs to the west, which, along with earlier advances up the opposite side of the Collierville draw, placed the Germans in an increasingly precarious position. Lieutenant Fröking's decision to retreat at 3 p.m. was timely, as they were on the verge of being completely surrounded. The retreat through the communication trenches was crucial for their survival, marking the collapse of one of the last formidable strongpoints on Omaha Beach. Hein's escape from WN62 followed the path of least resistance, utilising trenches, craters and any available cover to stay out of sight. Eventually he dropped into a sunken lane leading to the village of Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer and waited for his comrades. Kurt Wernecker, the radio operator, joined him, bearing the grim news that all others, including Lieutenant Fröking, had been killed. Moments later, they were hit by a burst of machine gun fire, sustaining painful flesh wounds, but managing to reach WN63, where a medic provided first aid. After a brief period of recuperation, the group, including a wagon filled with wounded soldiers and some American prisoners, one of whom spoke a familiar German dialect, decided to move inland under the cover of darkness. Just before dawn, they came under fire again and realized they were surrounded. In a twist of fate, they asked their American prisoners to facilitate their surrender. The GIs who captured them were from the 16th Infantry, the very regiment that had faced Severlow's machine gun fire all morning. Hein was cautious not to reveal too much about his role. Among the captured was a soldier from WN61 who described the devastating impact of Hein's gunfire on the American troops, including hundreds of bodies piled up in an area unseen by Hein during the battle. Despite his injuries, Hein spent the next few days assisting those worse off than himself in a temporary POW camp in Vierville, located at the opposite end of Omaha Beach. He was subsequently transported to England and then to the United States, where he worked in various camps along the East Coast, from Boston to Florida, primarily assisting with the harvest of crops like potatoes and cotton. In his book, Severlow recounts another incident that weighed heavily on his conscience regarding D-Day. He and a friend stumbled upon an old issue of Star magazine, which included a vivid account of a location he knew well. The page stated, "Men carrying weapons could not get to the beach on Easy Red because the bloody mess floating around was so high that the soldiers couldn't wade through it and kept sliding." Severlow remained a POW after the war, and in March 1946 he was transferred to Belgium, then to England and Scotland. Finally, after his aging father pleaded for assistance on the farm, Hein was released in April 1947. Upon returning home, Hein tried to readjust to farm life, but his wartime experiences could not be suppressed indefinitely. Many of these memories required some form of resolution, no matter how challenging that process would be. First, Hein needed to reach out to Lieutenant Fröking's family. 2 weeks after Hein's return, Fröking's mother visited. As her son was still listed as missing, Hein was able to confirm his fate as reported to him by Karl Wernecker. He then sent a sketch of WN62 to the Legrand family, with whom he had been billeted, asking if they could find any trace of a grave. Fernand Legrand soon visited the site and discovered a wooden marker. After consulting with authorities, he traced Fröking's remains to a cemetery constructed above the beach. Many temporary cemeteries in the area contained both American and German dead, and eventually most German remains, including Fröking's, were moved to a cemetery at La Cambe in the late 1950s. The most uplifting event for Hein upon his return was reconnecting with Lisa, a girl he had met just before being posted to France. They resumed their relationship from where they had left off in 1943 and married in 1949. For a while, Lisa was the only person Hein could confide in about the war, as he became deeply depressed, remorseful, and introspective. One memory that haunted Hein more than the widespread carnage caused by his MG42 was the single flamethrower-carrying soldier he had shot with his rifle. This incident led to frequent sleep deprivation. Hein became very anti-establishment and even joined the Association of Conscientious Objectors in Hanover. In 1961, Hein visited Normandy for the opening of the German military cemetery at La Combe. Accompanied by Fröking's mother and widow, he also revisited the site of WN62, which was then overgrown. Today, the main features of WN62 have been cleared, allowing visitors to trace the bunkers and trenches. He also reunited with the Legrand family for the first time since D-Day and learned that Fröking had telephoned them at 7 AM from his bunker, warning them of the invasion and advising them to seek safety in Bayeux 10 kilometers away. He believed that both the Germans and Allies would respect Bayeux as a historical monument, making it less likely to be targeted. This gesture illustrates the relationship they had developed with the residents of the village they had occupied. Although the Legrand family was well respected locally, their friendliness towards the Germans was risky, as they knew the French would harshly deal with collaborators. Mr. Legrand then made Hein an extraordinary offer. He asked Hein, an experienced farmer, to take over his farm in Houteville, as his only son had tragically passed away and both he and his wife were elderly. Despite considering the offer seriously, Hein ultimately felt he had to decline due to logistical challenges, but he remained in touch with the Legrands for the rest of their lives. Hein Severloh continued to make new connections through his association with Paul Carrel. One of the most significant came when Paul gave him the first edition of The Longest Day by Cornelius Ryan, which became a classic account of D-Day. In the book, Hein read about David Silver, who had come under heavy fire on Easy Red Beach at Collierville in the early afternoon. Silver was hit 3 times by a machine gun firing tracers, identifying Severloh as the shooter. Determined to make amends, Hein learned that David Silver had become a priest and moved to Akron, Ohio. Although Hein's initial letters were returned due to Silver's frequent relocations, he eventually tracked him down in Karlsruhe, Germany. This led to an emotional and cathartic reunion between the two veterans, fostering a lasting friendship and mutual respect. As the years passed, Hein made numerous connections with fellow D-Day veterans. In 1984, he received a call from Franz Gluckel, the then 18-year-old soldier of the 726th Grenadier Regiment who had been positioned just below him. Gluckel organised a reunion with men from WNs 60, 61, 62 and 63, inviting Hein to join them. This gathering provided Hein with crucial insights into the events of June 6, 1944, helping him piece together missing details and come to terms with the trauma he had experienced. During one visit, Hein met Jack Borman, whose duplex drive Sherman tank he remembered seeing stuck in the shingle below his position on the beach. Jack's tank had destroyed one of the 75mm artillery pieces on WN62 mentioned earlier in the video. Jack's expression of remorse for the casualties he caused served as a poignant reminder to Hein that war impacts soldiers on both sides similarly. From as early as 1960, when Paul Carrel's book Invasion, Their Coming was first published, Hein attracted attention from various authors and journalists. One of the most unusual encounters occurred in 1984, when an English reenactment group invited him to the United Kingdom. The group, named the Association for the Rehabilitation of the Honour of the German Wehrmacht Soldiers, wore meticulously decorated uniforms and followed military procedures familiar to Hein. They even presented him with a medal akin to a Purple Heart for the wounds he sustained on D-Day. Hein accepted the medal politely but left feeling bewildered, questioning why anyone would reenact events that had caused so much suffering. Hein also dealt with authors who, in his view, sensationalized his story and overlooked the anti-war message he wanted to convey. He received numerous offers to appear in documentaries and give interviews to French and German magazines. Despite his efforts to control the narrative, Hein found that journalists often put words in his mouth and asked leading questions, which added to his frustration and sense of misrepresentation. During an interview with the American ABC network following the 40th anniversary of D-Day in 1984, Hein was repeatedly asked how many men he had killed. When he declined to answer, the interviewer suggested a figure of 1,000. To end the questioning, Hein reluctantly agreed, even hinting it could be twice that number. This admission lightened his burden but also increased his notoriety, drawing more attention from journalists, authors and filmmakers. In 1999, leading D-Day author Helmut Konrad Baron von Keusgen contacted Hein and recognised the pivotal role he had played on that day. Keusgen offered to help Hein write his personal account, resulting in a friendship that allowed Hein to finally unburden himself of the traumas he endured 55 years after D-Day. This collaboration culminated in the book WN62, which detailed the full story of his experiences. In 2003, Hein was invited to appear in a film which brought his experiences to a head. During filming on the beach below WN62, he was asked to walk toward another man. As they approached, Hein realised it was David Silver, the man he had shot on D-Day, whom he had previously tracked down after reading The Longest Day. This reunion 39 years after their first led to 4 emotionally charged days of filming and reliving past events. A visit to the American cemetery near WN62 was particularly poignant, and both men decided it would be their last trip to Normandy. Hein's understanding of the devastation he caused on D-Day was based on his observations and accounts from other soldiers who saw bodies within his field of fire, some of which may have drifted along the coast. Media stories likely exaggerated his impact on the casualty list, and only recently has detailed work been done to assess the true figures. In his comprehensive account of Omaha Beach 2004, Joe Balkowski estimates the total US casualties, killed, wounded, missing, on D-Day at around 4,700. To understand Hein Severlow's role in these casualties, it's crucial to consider the overall defences in place. The beach was protected by 15 Widerstandsnest bunkers and large caliber guns situated further inland. Severlow himself mentioned that 85 machine guns were positioned along the beach, though not all were operational on that day. In addition to German weaponry, natural factors also contributed to the loss of life. The English Channel claimed many crew members of the duplex-drive Sherman tanks that failed to launch successfully offshore. Infantrymen who jumped off landing craft into deep water before the ramps were lowered, trying to avoid heavy fire, also drowned. These factors combined with the intense German defences to create a lethal environment for the landing troops. Omaha Beach spans over 6 kilometers. The 29th Infantry Division landed on the western half, with weather and currents pushing some of their 106th Infantry boats toward Easy Red. The 29th suffered about 1,350 casualties. The 1st Division, which landed on the eastern half from a point west of WN65 to below WN60, incurred only 70 fewer casualties. Additional units, mainly engineers, landed along the entire beach, completing the casualty list. After analysing these figures, it's evident that only a portion of the casualties were within Severlow's line of sight. Those who were might have also fallen victim to artillery shells, mortar bombs and other machine gun and rifle fire directed at them. Further investigation into the exact numbers would be largely academic and would not significantly enhance the understanding of the sacrifices made on D-Day or the study of history. It is reasonable to suggest that without Private Heinrich Severlow's actions, the US Army might have been a battalion stronger upon leaving the Normandy beachhead. The notoriety Severlow gained later in life, earning him the title the Beast of Omaha, was largely self-inflicted. He could have resumed his life in his local farming community, keeping his experiences and thoughts private. However, his curiosity and conscience drove him to confront the harrowing events of that day repeatedly, leading to a lifelong engagement with the most traumatic and horrific day of his life. From his writings and the numerous interviews available online, there is no indication that Heinz-Severlo sought to glorify his wartime actions. He did not portray himself as another war victim or seek sympathy. By exposing his feelings of guilt, he took significant risks, especially during his frequent visits to Normandy, where he could have encountered individuals still harbouring thoughts of revenge. Hein would have preferred to forget his role in World War II, but he found that he could not. Instead, he chose to share his story with the world, highlighting the profound consequences of one nation waging war against another. His revelations serve as a powerful reminder of the need to seek peaceful solutions to conflicts, challenging us to prevent history from repeating itself and to avoid any more brother wars by any means necessary. Before we end, let's listen to his transcript interview from his words. However, it will be in English and covered by us since his is in German.
When I was confronted by what seemed to be a wall of Allied ships, I said, "My God, how am I going to get out of this mess?" I remember thinking, what could I do? I just thought that I was never going to make it to the rear. I thought that I was going to shoot for my very life. It was them or me. That is what I thought. Fröking explained in a very intense manner, "You must open fire when the enemy is knee-deep in the water and is still unable to run quickly." I saw how the water sprayed up where my machine gun bursts landed, and when the small fountains came closer to the GIs, they threw themselves down. Very soon the first bodies were drifting in the waves of the rising tide. In a short time all the Americans down there were shot. It was definitely at least 1,000 men I killed, most likely more than 2,000. But I do not know how many men I shot. It was awful. Thinking about it makes me want to throw up. I almost emptied an entire infantry landing craft. The sea was red around it, and I could hear an American officer shouting hysterically in a loudspeaker. I have fired that machine gun. I did it as part of my training, and it has an extremely high rate of fire. He was in a position which was almost impervious to the weapons which the Americans could bring to bear on him. The Americans made the mistake of not landing tanks with the first wave of troops, so they had no support or protection.
And that will bring us to the end of this video. Heinz-Severlo's story is a powerful reminder of the complexities of war and the enduring impact it has on individuals. His journey from a soldier on Omaha Beach to a man seeking reconciliation and understanding is truly remarkable. It goes to show how bad and terrible war is, and doing what we are doing here is absolutely key to the future of humanity. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Have you read any of Severlo's writings or seen interviews with him? Let's continue the conversation in the comments below. Also, don't forget to hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming videos. As always, I really appreciate every single one of you. I'm so grateful to have you with me on this historical adventure. A big thanks to my patrons. You can find links to my Patreon and Instagram below, where I post much more content. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and subscribe. Both help me out tremendously. And lastly, I hope to see you on the next adventure. Goodbye for now.